You were scanned by the Arcturians. Your energy is no longer the same. Stop scrolling. Put your thumb or your hand over your heart for a moment, or simply rest your attention in the body where you are. Notice anything. A small pressure behind the sternum, a gentle heat at the crown, a fizzing at your fingertips, or nothing obvious at all. Whatever you find, hold it lightly. This message found you because something in your field matched an observer's grid, and that match is the beginning of a new tuning. If you want, say the phrase silently or type it below. I open to Arcturian coherence. If public typing doesn't feel safe, simply hold it in your mind for a breath. Either way is fine. This is optional. Breathe once slowly now. Inhale, exhale, and let the frame of what follows land in your body. The simplest way to talk about the Arcturians here is practical, not speculative. Think of them as a non-personal intelligence that scans electromagnetic signatures and responds to patterns of coherence. In the Arcturian model, they operate like a high-resolution antenna field. They do not interpret your stories. They read your frequency composition, the mix of your mind, emotion, somatic tone, and persistent unconscious patterns. And then the wider lattice around you adjusts in relation to that reading. You weren't singled out because you were good or bad. You were matched because your present frequency registered on the observation matrix. That match changed how the surrounding field begins to reflect you. Grounding reminder: keep feeling your feet, the contact with the floor or seat, and the rhythm of the breath. This is optional and safe. If anything becomes overwhelming at any point, simply put your hand on your belly, slow the breath, and return attention to the physical sensing. There are patterns to the way people report being detected. Some notice synchronicities accelerating. Coincidences that feel like signposts appear more frequently. Others feel micro-shifts in timing. Meetings arrive earlier or later. Dreams become vivid, or the sense of time compresses and stretches. Socially, people report sudden rearrangements. Someone who is distant becomes a mirror, or an old friend exits without drama. Somatic cues often accompany these events: a vibration behind the eyes, a warmth at the throat, a light pressure at the temples. These are not universal. They are signals that many find familiar when a field outside the usual range begins to engage with their frequency. Imagine a shoreline where tiny waves sweep pebbles differently when a new consistent current moves under the surface. Your energy now functions like that current, where before the external world may have been textured by fragmentation, half-wants, habits that no longer serve, conversations that leave you depleted. This detection invites a new calibration. This is not an editing of your life story, but a tightening of your signal.
You'll begin to radiate a different electromagnetic signature simply by being steadier in the present. A brief anchor. If you sense heat or pressure, place one hand lightly on the area and breathe into it. If you do not feel anything, imagine the area softening and warming. Say internally, I am present. You may type that phrase in the chat if you wish, or keep it private. What does the Arcturian lattice actually see? Within their framework, the primary variable is coherence, how aligned your inner state is across thought, emotion, and body. Think of coherence as the integrity of a signal, how much noise versus clean frequency is present. When your inner voice, your felt sense, and your actions are relatively aligned, you create a narrowband signal that is easy to lock onto. When they're fragmented, desire on one channel, fear on another, the signal breaks into static, and the field responds with chaotic mirroring. Here is a way to recognize the mirror without blaming it. When you feel fragmented, the world tends to present fractured feedback. Someone's anger looks like your own unresolved fear echoed outward. When you are steady, the world shifts toward forms that match that steadiness, not necessarily as instant miracles, but as more coherent synchronistic support, clearer timing, and a stronger sense of alignment with what you choose next. Microstory. A woman I'll call Mara began noticing small but telling shifts. For weeks, she gets stuck in loops of wanting to change careers without taking steps. After a few consistent practices of honest check-ins, she reported that an unexpected mentor reached out, and a job conversation moved from casual to concrete in 2 weeks. She didn't credit luck. She described a quieter internal field that allowed coordination. That is the kind of effect we mean when we say the grid mirrors coherence rather than judging content. Grounding reminder. Bring attention to your hands for 2 breaths. Wiggle the fingers if that helps. Keep this practice simple, no pressure to perform. Now a short technical image. Picture your energy as a broadcast waveform. Your mental narrative is one filter, emotional tone is another, and the unexamined habitual loop beneath them is a low-frequency hum. The Arcturian scan reads the composite signature across those layers. If the hum is strong, it distorts the broadcast even when the mind tries to tune to a new station. The way forward isn't always adding new techniques. Sometimes it's lowering the hum, noticing, naming, and letting go of the habitual loops that create interference. A microactivation here. Mentally or aloud, state, I lower the hum to receive clearer signal. Repeat once or twice. If speaking aloud feels unsafe, hold the phrase in your mind. After repeating, rest and note any subtle sensations, a release at the chest, a lengthening in the back of the neck, a softening in the jaw.
These are embodiment cues, pointers that you're moving from thought into felt experience. Frequently asked question that often surfaces at this point, is this just an algorithm or some internet tracking? It can feel similar because both read patterns, but the response here is different in character. What we're describing is an energetic observation and calibration that correlates with internal coherence. It does not target your browser history or sell ads. It responds to field qualities that often precede and shape outer events. Use appears to or tends to when you talk about this, because there is no empirical claim being made here, only an operational model that helps you interpret experience meaningfully. One of the central tensions people face when they learn their field has been seen is the difference between being and wanting. The field responds to being more reliably than to wanting. Wanting activates an appetite. Being signals a settled design. Picture two people visualizing abundance. One is filled with longing and anxiety, the other with an honest acceptance of lack paired with steady, present action. Both may use the same visualization techniques, but the second tends to produce a cleaner signal because the inner state supports the image. Practical microtask. Do a 5-step inner audit now. Take a breath and ask, what am I feeling? What am I thinking about in this moment? What sensations live in my body? Where is tension held? Without judgment, note one-word answers. Then breathe out and say, I name this. That naming alone reorients the loop from unconscious hum to observed data. Repeat this practice 2 to 3 times a day for a few days and notice whether your clarity shifts. Story vignette. Tomas, who worked in design, practiced that naming ritual before interviews. He didn't do long meditations, he didn't change his career overnight. He simply became consistent in noticing the knot at the throat and naming it as anticipatory tightness. After a few weeks, he noticed less self-sabotage during calls and a clearer alignment in follow-up conversations. The outer world didn't change because of grand technique. It changed because he had lowered his interference. A critical reframe we need to cover. Many of our common practices, meditations, affirmations, visualizations, act as temporary coherence generators. They are valuable, especially as starter tools, but they can also feel like band-aids when used to avoid honest internal work. A meditation can raise your frequency for 20 minutes. That's helpful. A deep, honestly owned shift in inner calibration creates a sustained, broader field. The difference is not technique versus no technique. It's technique plus integration. Here's an illustration. Imagine your internal system like a thermostat and the meditation like opening a window. For a while, the room cools, but if the thermostat is set to a different temperature, the system will eventually return to its prior setting.
Integration is changing the thermostat, the baseline programming of your inner state, not only opening windows. Practices are excellent for window work, but integration rewrites baseline tendencies. Short guided reflection. Sit quietly for 30 seconds. Imagine your inner thermostat and sense what it's set to. Worry, drama, calm, scarcity, abundance. Name that setting. Then imagine you can gently turn the dial one notch toward the quality you prefer. Don't force, just notice the micro-adjust. Repeat as needed. This is optional. If sitting is unsafe or uncomfortable, do a walking version of the same exercise. Feel your steps and name the quality as you move. I adjust toward steady. Another question that arises is, why did this happen now? Why me? In the Arcturian framework, detection is not a moral judgment or a reward. It often correlates with the alignment of a person's resonance with a monitoring frequency. Sometimes it's coincidental. Sometimes it's a response to small, consistent practices you've already held. Sometimes it's simply timing. What matters more than the why is the responsibility of conscious choice now. You can choose to respond with awareness or let the field make calibration by default. We should pause briefly to anchor. Take 3 slow breaths and place a soft attention in the belly. Drink water afterward if you can. This helps embodiment and keeps the nervous system regulated when more subtle energetic language is introduced. Authenticity functions as a surprisingly efficient shortcut to coherence. When you allow yourself to admit the truth of your present state, not to shame it, but to accept it, you collapse internal contradiction. That collapse reduces interference. Authenticity is not the same as unfiltered reactivity. It's the clear reporting of inner reality. Saying, "I am tired and uncertain," can be more effective than a forced, high-energy affirmation that does not match your felt experience. In other words, truth-telling inside yourself creates a cleaner broadcast. Microactivation. Say, silently or aloud, "I speak my truth into the field." Repeat twice. Journal prompt. Spend 5 minutes writing the sentence, "Right now, I honestly feel," and list the first 5 items that come without editing. Time yourself. This is a practice of decluttering the hidden hum. A mini case. Lena resisted authenticity because she feared loss. When she began to name her fatigue openly to trusted peers and to herself, she noticed 2 things. 1, decisions became clearer. 2, some relationships loosened while others strengthened quickly. The field mirrored that new honesty. This is not a guarantee that everyone will experience identical social shifts, but it exemplifies how truth can restructure the energetic contours of your life. The idea of state overriding story is one many resist because our personal narratives feel fixed. But a present state change reorganizes how your narrative holds you.
You do not need to rewrite the facts of the past to change the effect the past has on your frequency. For example, 2 people with similar histories of rejection may carry opposite present states. One carries subdued resignation, the other carries gentle curiosity. The world responds differently to each because the present field is different. Exercise for this. Choose one memory that often triggers a heavy reaction. Sit with it for 1 breath and then redirect. What is the physiological sensation that remains now? Name it. Then ask, if I hold nothing but curiosity toward this sensation for 1 minute, what changes? Curiosity is a state. It loosens the limbic ceiling that locks a story into ongoing reaction. This is not therapy. If the memory is traumatic in a clinically severe way, seek professional support. If it's a recurring trigger you can tolerate briefly, use curiosity as an experiment. Grounding reminder. Press your palms together lightly and notice warmth. Keep this simple and non-dramatic. There is a threshold we need to begin to speak about, not as alarmism, but as a practical window. You are in a moment where small, conscious moves matter more than they might have before. The lattice reads acceleration in micropatterns, consistent pause and name habits, repeated authenticity, even small daily recalibrations. When these accumulate, the system marks your field as ready for a higher coherence echelon. That readiness looks like a tightening of mirrored responses. Opportunities that align appear with less friction, intuitive nudges come with greater clarity, and your inner compass feels crisper. This is the point where many people make 2 common errors. One is to try to manufacture intensity, to chase sensations in exotic states, which often increases noise. The other is to ignore subtle shifts and continue with old emotional autopilots. Both routes reduce the quality of your signal. What the Arcturian model privileges is steady calibration, small, honest actions, repeated and embodied. Activation practice, optional and safe. Place 1 hand on your heart and 1 on your belly. Breathe in for 4 counts, hold 1, out for 6 counts, 3 times. On the exhale, say silently, stabilize. Again, optional. If breathing exercises are contraindicated for you for any reason, simply imagine the stabilization phrase in your mind and then return to normal breathing. A question you might have now is, if I was scanned, can I go back to how I was before? The short, careful answer is that your field now has a different reference point. Going back to earlier habits is possible, but the feedback loop that now responds to your frequency will make old patterns show up more clearly and sooner. That can feel like either progress or pressure, depending on your relationship to transformation. The important practical stance is consent. Choose what you want to practice next, rather than reacting to the immediacy of the field.
Before we move deeper, a gentle, practical integration protocol you can begin immediately. Over the next 7 days, do one short practice daily, naming your state aloud, a 3-breath stabilization, a 5-minute curiosity journaling, or a brief embodied movement that loosens tension. Keep it lightweight and consistent. The point is to increase the number of coherence-creating instances rather than the intensity of any single practice. Another grounding cue: put your feet on the floor now if possible. Feel the connection. Notice any change in your posture. As you integrate this, you may notice an intensification of inner knowing. Not always loud or dramatic, but a steadier compass. People describe this as an up-level in intuition or timing. You anticipate conversations more clearly. You sense right timing for action. Again, not a guarantee, just a pattern many have shared after detection. It's useful to keep a small log of these sensations, a 1-line note each day that says, "Today my compass said," so you can see trends rather than reacting to singular anomalies. A common doubt: is this spiritual bypassing? Authentic practice requires openness to discomfort. If your practices only serve to avoid uncomfortable feelings, they're likely bypassing. Real coherence work leans into honest naming and gentle integration rather than endless positive overlay. If you find yourself repeatedly using techniques to avoid facing an issue that causes severe distress, seek supportive therapy alongside these practices. We're approaching a deep layer now, not to be dramatic, but to invite careful attention. When the lattice detects someone ready for higher coherence, it often surfaces a mirror that accelerates the appearance of what is already present in the field. For some, that mirror feels like a sudden intensification of circumstances. For others, it's inner acceleration. Both forms are invitations to choose with clarity. The next segment will explore the specific mechanics of mirroring and calibration, and then move into a facilitated activation sequence that is voluntary and layered: beginner, intermediate, advanced, each with safe alternatives and clear grounding cues. Before we step into that, take a final breath with me now. Full inhale, soft exhale. Rest for a moment. Notice whether anything inside feels different from when you started. Keep a small, non-judgmental note of it. If you experienced anything intense or disorienting at any point, consider pausing this session and returning later. If you feel safe, continue. There is more here to unfold about how the Arcturian field calibrates thresholds and what to do when the mirror intensifies. You were scanned. That scan adjusted the contours of your energetic signature, and that adjustment is now interacting with a responsive lattice. How you engage with the next few days, gently, honestly, and consistently, will be the deciding variable in how smoothly the integration moves. In the next part, we will map the exact mirroring mechanisms in more technical detail, introduce layered activation sequences with alternatives for safety, and show practical integration steps to keep your baseline steady while the field reorganizes. For now, anchor what you've learned. Name one honest sensation, breathe, and choose one small practice to repeat today. Now let's look under the hood at what the mirror actually does and how the lattice tends to translate the signal it reads into the feedback you're experiencing. The Arcturian model, as it appears to operate in many reports, treats your field like a composite instrument. There are harmonic layers, phase relationships, and interference patterns. Imagine several layered radio waves. If they're roughly in phase, the resultant amplitude is clear and strong. If they're out of sync, the reception fragments. The lattice reads not just amplitude, how loud your intention is, but phase, whether your thinking, feeling, body, and habitual background align in timing and tone. That alignment, or coherence, is what narrows the field and makes your signature legible. When the lattice locks onto a clearer signature, the external environment responds with calibration rather than moral judgment. Calibration looks like timing that clears up, mirrors that match more closely, and opportunities that land with less friction, because the field around you can hand you situations that fit the clearer waveform you're broadcasting. This mechanism explains why some of the most profound changes feel gradual in felt sense, but suddenly obvious in life. A pattern of small internal corrections eventually reaches the threshold where the lattice recognizes a sustained change and the mirror reorganizes more rapidly. That threshold is not metaphysical mysticism so much as a change in systemic stability. When enough internal variables remain steady across minutes, days, and weeks,
The grid reads the new baseline and responds accordingly. That's the practical reason the one-off grand techniques rarely produce the sustained shifts people expect. Single spikes of coherence are visible, but they don't reprogram the background hum. Reprogramming requires repetition and integration. Grounding reminder: bring your attention to the sensations under your feet and breathe. This is optional and safe. If anything feels heavy, place one hand on your belly and slow the breath for a moment. To be useful and safe, let me lay out a 3-tiered activation sequence you may try as a voluntary experiment. Each tier includes an option for private practice if you prefer not to engage publicly, and a clear safety alternative if any step feels destabilizing. Beginner tier, the clarity anchor. This is for simple stabilization and is short enough to use before meetings, calls, or at the start of your day. Sit or stand comfortably. Place one hand on your heart and the other on your belly.
Breathe in for a count that feels natural. No need for forced rhythm. Notice where you feel the breath most, and mentally say once, silently, "I lower the hum." Let the phrase land without expecting a sensation. Then name one honest word for your present state: tired, curious, steady, anxious, out loud or in your mind, and follow it with, "I accept this." Return attention to the feet for 2 breaths. This practice takes under a minute and can be repeated as needed. The safe alternative is a single breath in with the thought, "I notice," and a soft exhale with the thought, "I release." If breathing triggers lightheadedness or panic for you, simply rub your palms together for 30 seconds and notice warmth. This reconnects grounding without breathwork. Intermediate tier, the tightening ritual. This sequence asks for slightly more sustained attention across 3 rounds. Begin by finding a posture where your spine feels supported. Start with 3 slow breaths, and on each exhale, imagine a gentle tightening in the area behind the sternum, not forceful, simply like softening to a firmer center. After the 3rd breath, silently state twice, "I choose coherence." Then do a 1-minute scan from crown to feet, naming any held tension as you go: forehead, jaw, shoulders, ribcage, belly, hips, knees, calves, feet. For each location you notice tension, offer a micro-command to yourself: soften, rest, or let go. Close by placing hands on thighs and feeling contact. Say quietly, signal steady. If sitting still is difficult, the walking alternative is to pace slowly for 1 minute, count steps to 30, and with each step feel the earth underfoot and think steady. If the scanning becomes triggering, reduce to scanning only the shoulders and breath for the same 1-minute time frame. Advanced tier, the phase alignment sequence. Reserved for those who have practiced stabilization and feel safe with more extended inner attention, the sequence introduces the idea of aligning subtle phases: mental narrative, emotional tone, somatic baseline, and intention. Set aside 6 to 12 minutes. Begin with 2 minutes of breath and grounding as above. Then imagine a circle with 4 quadrants representing mind, heart, body, and habit. Spend 1 minute in each quadrant sensing what's present without judgment. What thought is most present? What predominant feeling lives in the chest? What posture or tension appears in the body? What repeating loop plays beneath awareness? After spending a minute in each, envision the quadrants slowing and coming into a gentle clockwise rotation until they move together as one. On that imagined co-rotation, quietly say 3 times, "aligned," and by writing 1 line, "today's alignment, : and fill in a word or short phrase. Safe alternative, perform a verbal check-in with a trusted friend for a few minutes and say your single word for mind, heart, body, habit.
If at any point the advanced work creates disorientation, stop, place both feet on the floor, drink water, and reach out for support or professional care if needed. Each of these tiers is optional and offered as experiments rather than prescriptions. They tend to function as coherence-generating practices. The beginner tier increases momentary clarity, the intermediate creates micro-habits of observation and release, and the advanced builds a felt map of internal timing. Many people who report deeper integrations layer these practices across weeks rather than attempting the entire schema in single sessions. Grounding reminder: if you've just done any of these, pause and feel your spine against your seat or your feet on the floor. This helps stabilization in the nervous system. Let's return to practical exemplars to make these mechanisms feel less abstract. I'll share a short anonymized story. Aisha, a teacher in her 30s, noticed a sudden stream of coincidences after she began doing a daily 60-second clarity anchor. At first they were small: a book recommendation that exactly matched a question she'd had, a neighbor who introduced her to someone who needed tutoring. But then invitations to speak in small community groups arrived without her seeking them. She describes the shift as subtle and non-sensational. She simply felt less reactive and more likely to take aligned next steps when they appeared.
Another vignette. Marco, an urban emergency responder, experienced increased intensity after being scanned. He reported odd timing. Calls would shift by minutes in ways that affected logistics. Initially, he panicked, interpreting timing changes as career risk. After practicing naming and stabilization for a month, the same timing changes translated into smoother coordination and better team communication because his field no longer amplified urgency-driven stress. Both examples show how the mirror can amplify what's present. The quality of your interior determines whether that amplification becomes support or pressure. People often ask about timeline shifts, what that phrase means in everyday language. For the purposes of practical engagement, timeline shifts appear as changes in relative sequencing and felt timing rather than time travel. You may notice events that felt unlikely suddenly synchronizing, or opportunities that previously felt out of reach lining up more easily in sequence. The lattice doesn't rewrite facts of the past, rather it reorganizes probable pathways that lead forward by shifting resonance. That is why state matters. If your present state narrows probability towards certain outcomes, the lattice will tend to reflect scenarios consistent with that narrowed resonance. Grounding reminder. Place both hands on your lap and notice the temperature of your palms. This simple sensory cue resets attention.
Another section we must address carefully is interference. Why do some practices feel like they fail, and what creates the persistent hum that undermines technique? The interference often comes from mismatched commitments. For instance, if you repeat an affirmation that says, "I am abundant," while simultaneously holding a background narrative of scarcity in deeper emotion or habitual decision-making, the resultant signature remains mixed and therefore noisy. The lattice reads that mixture and responds with mirrors that emphasize inconsistency, sudden small losses, confusing timing, or relational friction. The practical pathway out of interference is twofold. First, reduce blind habitual loops by naming them. Second, enact tiny consistent behaviors that align with the state you say you prefer. For abundance orientation, that may mean small, tangible decisions that align with a resourceful identity, choosing one act of care for finances, a short planning step, or investing a modest, proportionate resource into a priority. The aim is not to chase prosperity as guarantee, but to create behavioral signals that reinforce an inner state. Micro-practical suggestion. Pick one small action in the external world this week that matches the inner state you want to hold. Make it proportionate and safe. If your state is curiosity, enroll in a class or read one article. If it's steadiness, set it do not disturb block for 30 minutes and do nothing but check in. The point is consistent, calibrated action that reinforces internal coherence. We also need to discuss social mirroring because it's often the most emotionally jolting. When your energy begins to broadcast a different signature, social dynamics can shift rapidly. Some people move closer to you in resonance, and some drift away. Neither outcome is necessarily good or bad. It's feedback. If someone distances themselves, the field often reflects that they no longer match your emergent waveform. That space may create grief or relief. Lean into curiosity rather than instant interpretation. Ask, what does this change reveal about our alignment? If it reveals misalignment and you desire continued relationship, the next step is clear. Compassionate conversation grounded in honesty. If it reveals incongruence you do not want to repair, allow the release and practice the authenticity shortcut. Name what you see to yourself and then act in alignment. Grounding reminder. Take 2 slow breaths and feel the contact of your clothing on your skin. Small sensory anchors reduce reactivity. Now, a practical integration protocol you can follow across the next 2 weeks. It's intentionally light but cumulative. Day 1 through day 14 are modular, so you can repeat or skip days as needed. Day 1, set a simple practice of 1-minute clarity anchor morning and night.
Day 2, after each clarity anchor, write one line. Today I notice. Day 3, add a micro behavior that aligns with one small value, a minute phone call, a short walk, a tiny creative step. Day 4, do a 3-minute scan and name one habitual loop aloud. Day 5, do the intermediate tier once. Day 6, rest. Do only grounding touch and hydration. Day 7, review your notes for the week and note any patterns. Day 8, repeat day 1 but extend the evening anchor to 2 minutes. Day 9, choose one relationship to practice authenticity, a brief disclosure of a present state without narrative blame. Day 10, try the advanced tier for a short version, 4 minutes total. Day 11, rest and drink extra water. Day 12, journal for 5 minutes on what feels different. Day 13, do 2 clarity anchors and 1 micro behavior. Day 14, review the 14 days, choose 1 practice to carry forward, and commit to a simple weekly rhythm. Each day includes a grounding reminder: breathe, notice feet, hydrate. The goal is repetition and containment rather than intensity. If any day feels destabilizing, pause and seek support. If you are experiencing significant distress, prioritize professional care. I'll include a brief, anonymized case study to illustrate the rhythm of integration. Priya, who worked in remote marketing, noticed a series of uncanny coincidences: a podcast guest who precisely answered a question she had, a former colleague appearing with a relevant job lead, and a health checkup that prompted reassessment. Initially, she felt unsteady, interpreting coincidences as pressure. She chose the consented path: daily clarity anchors, journaling 1 line each night, and a small behavioral shift, applying for only 2 roles that matched her values, rather than dozens indiscriminately. Within 8 weeks, she reported a clearer sense of which conversations to accept and which to decline. Her field did not guarantee offers. It amplified clarity so her decision-making became less scattershot. The consequence were fewer interviews, but higher alignment, and when the right opportunity arrived, she recognized it quickly because her internal compass had steadied. This illustrates a repeated theme. The lattice amplifies what you already embody. The key is to decide what you want to embody and to practice toward it. People often bring practical objections or doubts. Isn't this just wishful thinking? Is one such question. The answer I offer is that the Arcturian framing gives language to patterns that many notice independently: alignment, timing, synchrony. Whether you interpret those as energetic, psychological, or statistical, the suggestion remains the same. Test with small, ethical, low-risk experiments and measure practical outcomes. Another frequent question is, are they benevolent or manipulative? The operational model here treats the lattice as non-personal. It calibrates based on signal, not moral appraisal.
Experiences will vary. Maintain agency by choosing your response rather than assuming external control. One more common doubt: can I be scanned without wanting it? Yes, detection appears to happen without explicit desire and often correlates with resonance rather than conscious petition. The important action is what you do with that detection now. Grounding reminder. As any part of this material makes you anxious, stop and return attention to 3 slow breaths and the sensation of feet on the floor. This line is intentionally repeated, so you have simple steps to downregulate. If you notice heat, pressure, or tingling, place a hand on the area and breathe into it. If you feel nothing, just finish by imagining a light, steady hum calming across your chest and head. Close with 1 line written or mental: I choose to practice with care. This is not a guarantee of any outcome. It's a marker of consent and intention. If at any point you feel unwell or intensely dysregulated, stop and ground with water and contact for support. Grounding reminder. Finish by sipping water and feeling your jaw relax. This is a small but important practice to stabilize the nervous system after inner work. Before the close, a short FAQ addressing platform concerns and safety. No, you do not need to write a public comment to be engaged by these ideas. Writing publicly is optional. Silent practice or private journaling is equally potent. No, this is not prescriptive medical or psychiatric advice. If you are struggling with symptoms of mental illness or any serious health condition, prioritize professional care. No, joining the member circle I'll mention in a moment does not guarantee results. It offers guided transmissions, containment, and community calibration that some people find supportive as they practice deeper coherence work. Finally, practical logistics about integration in a community context. The member circle is designed as a supportive environment where advanced transmissions, weekly calibration practices, and small group integration sessions are offered for those who feel called to deeper support.
The circle provides additional structure, weekly calibration exercises, guided Q&A, case studies, and field support activations that are meant to complement your private practices. Participation is optional and results vary. If you choose to join, treat it as a resource rather than a guarantee. Use it to enhance practice frequency, not as a substitute for personal responsibility or professional care when needed. If you decide it's not for you, that's completely fine. The independent protocol laid out here is intentionally sufficient for many people who prefer solo practice. This is the one explicit invitation I offer at the close. If the idea of contained, progressive field recalibration resonates with you, and you want guided, community-based support in transmissions, consider joining the member circle. Link in the description. Membership provides added structure for people who want regular calibration and small group containment. Participation does not promise outcomes. Results vary with consistency, context, and individual conditions. If you do join, use the resources conservatively and maintain regular grounding, hydration, and professional support as appropriate. One final activation to carry you into practical integration. Choose your preferred format. Type, speak privately, or hold in mind, and complete this 3-line practice. Line 1. Name one honest present state with a single word.
Line 2. Choose one small aligned action you will take today. Line 3. Silently say, I consent to clear signal. Pause, breathe, and then go about your day with gentle attention. If public typing feels safe, you may type the single word of your present state in the chat. If it doesn't, keep it private. Either choice honors consent and privacy. Grounding close. Place both feet squarely on the ground. Take 3 full breaths. Feel the weight of your body where it meets support, and drink water. If at any point in the coming days you feel overwhelmed by intensity or destabilization, stop these practices, seek grounding, and consult a professional if symptoms persist. The landscape we are describing is not about coercion, it's about increased visibility and choice. You were scanned by the Arcturians, and because of that, your energy is no longer the same. That difference is not a sentence, it is an invitation. Choose with care, practice with gentleness, and nurture the steady work of lowering interference and strengthening coherence. If you want deeper guided support in a contained field, the member circle link is in the description, a place to practice with others and receive additional transmissions. Otherwise, pick one micro practice from the protocol above and repeat it for 7 days. Breathe, hydrate, and be kind to yourself. Your field is changing. Let that change be guided by consent, clarity, and consistent care.